Ever wondered how to create a dark mode, light mode switcher in your app? My name is Fani Renders, and I'm going to quickly show you how easy it is to create a theme switcher inside Blazor with a few lines of code. Come on, let's check it out. Here we have a Blazor application that's based on the stock standard Blazor WebAssembly template. And what we're going to be doing is basically adding a style to the body tag or the body element of HTML to toggle the certain styles. For instance, if we head up to our index page, we can create a style sheet. And what we want to do there is we want to be able to implement two styles. First and foremost, body with a dark class, and also, for instance, a dark class based on a button. The forecolor we want to apply, for instance, white. And the background color we want to apply black. And when working with buttons, obviously it has a border, so let's also color the border. Right. So the idea is when we apply this setting to our application, we will have an effect that's dark mode. Right. This is what we want to achieve. So how can we do this programmatically? We do this by creating a new class that will hold the theme for the application. We'll call this app theme. And the app theme will take a constructor that will inject, we will inject in this case the JS runtime. And we'll call this JS, and we'll also just auto assign a field to this whole thing. We will be interrupting with the JavaScript runtime through C#, so that's why we need this object. So the first thing we want to do is actually have a property that will hold the state of our dark mode. In this case, we will have a private boolean. We'll call this is dark mode, and we set it for now to false, right? And then we'll have a public property. We call this is dark mode, and we will have that default on the is dark mode private property. But also when it is set, we want to do something special to it. When the dark mode is set, we want to set it to the value that is passed in, but also we want to be able to call the JavaScript runtime, invoke async set dark mode. I just want to change this to avoid to invoke void async, because it's not really returning anything. No, that doesn't need to be there. Right. Control KD. After a quick compile, that will do the trick. So now we have a basic class implemented that we can actually start using. Before we can start using that, we should really add it to our services that we're going to be injecting. So in this case, we're going to go builder.services.add singleton, and we're going to be just passing in the app theme that we created now, so that there's only one copy of that state in our application. Now the next part is the fun part. Now we're going to be using this whole theme switcher. I'm just going to remove the page, and we need to create a button, for instance, to change the theme, right? So in this case, we'll create a button, and we'll call this button toggle theme. Right, and also what we'll have is we'll have let's say some text that will say, for instance, hello, and we'll have the theme in there. Now we want to start using the actual application theme that we've created. We do that using the add inject feature to inject the dependency. And we'll call this theme inside our Blazor application, Razor component. Now we can actually use that, right? So we can now say, for instance, hello at theme.isDarkMode. So if it's dark mode, we want to say dark theme. If it's light mode, we want to say light theme. Like that. And now to actually make it change, what we'll do is we will add some code and we'll implement a void function. Called toggle theme, for instance. And now we would basically just set dark mode as the opposite of dark mode in this case. So if dark mode is false, it will set it to true. If it's true, it will set it to false. Let's do a quick compile to see everything is fine, and it looks fine. Quickly running it. It's now on dark mode. Let's toggle theme. Nothing is happening. This is because we are trying to call in set dark mode, but the JavaScript for doing so does not exist yet. So let's go back here and quickly remove the class from the body, otherwise it defaults on dark. But what we also want to do is we want to implement it on the client side using the JavaScript features. So the first thing we want to do is actually have a function. We'll call the function set dark mode. And also note that this function needs to be the exact same name with the casing than the one that we've calling and defined from the app theme CS file. So what this will do is accept a isDarkMode parameter. And if it is dark mode, we want to add that class to the body, right? So we do this by going window.document.body.classlist.add, and we want to add dark to that. If it's not, we gracefully remove it by just doing the opposite. Now that the JavaScript is implemented, let's see how that runs. There's the theme, and toggle doesn't work. Aha, we need to actually bind the code to the button. Going back to the Razor page, we have to find a function, but on the button click, it's not defined. So we do this by going at on click, and then we say, you know what, call the toggle theme function. After a quick save and the button is bounded, let's see how it reacts. We say hello light theme, that works, and we toggle white and black. Great. So now what happens if the browser is set on a certain theme, right? Here we have Edge, for instance. It has a system default, right? I want to default on the system default theme. Or I want to default on the light theme, for instance. So if I keep my browser on the light theme and I close the browser, if I open this up again, coincidentally, it will be the light theme, right? But if I then change my browser to dark, like it was before, it will stay light, like we've seen before. It won't react to the host theme, which in this case, the experience is a bit not nice. So how can we implement that? Going back to our JavaScript application, let's do a couple of more functions here. The first thing that we want to do is we want to have a constant. We call this prefers dark query. And this is a CSS selector that we're going to be running against. Prefers color scheme dark. Right, so that is a CSS selector that when a user prefers a certain color scheme, that will be evaluated. Let's create another function, and we call this is system dark mode. And that basically checks the media. So if it matches the media with the query, it is preferred. That is system dark mode. The implementation, however, on the app theme, we will also need to do. Let's create a new function here. Let's call this function public async bool, or async task bool rather, and we'll call it is browser dark mode. And that will basically just ask JavaScript to invoke a Boolean function is browser dark mode. So this one is the function that we've created here. So that's obviously Copilot is not generating me correctly. So let's go and change that. I actually like system dark mode better, or is browser dark mode better. So let's maybe change that to is browser dark mode. So it's a function called is browser dark mode. It will then run a match on the, or like a match query on the window, and when it matches, it will be either true for system preferences or not. After a quick save, let's implement it on our page. The first thing we want to do here in this case is we want to check the system preferences. We do this by going protected, override async task, and we call on after render async. And this, I believe, takes in a Boolean first render, because we only want to do this when it renders the first time, not every time. So if it's the first render, we want to say theme.dark mode. Let's get the theme, the browser dark mode. We use that from our theme provider. Now the next time I run this application, it is dark mode. And when the user sets the application in the meanwhile to light mode and exits, when the application starts up the next time, it is in light mode. Great. You know, typically these kind of things doesn't happen often, but when a user creates or when a user changes the theme in flight, for instance, like I'm doing now, it's now light mode, dark mode. And this experience isn't very well either. Typically, we also want the application to react based on the setting that we have here. Let's quickly implement that. Let's add another feature to our theme provider. On our theme switcher, on our app theme class, let's add a few functions here. The first function that we want to be adding here is a event, right? So we're going to be saying public event action, and we'll call this on change. Next, we're going to be adding a new function to listen for changes. We'll call this public async task listen for theme changes. And to do this, what we will be doing is creating a new .NET helper that will pass into the JavaScript runtime to execute. And then when it creates an event based on the change, it will execute a function on that .NET helper class. To create a .NET helper, we basically create a .NET object reference. .NET object reference.create. There we go. And then we need to await the javascript.invoke void async, and we'll call this add theme event listener, and we'll pass in that .NET helper inside of that. Right, so that's the C# part of things. Well, before I go on, what we want to do is whenever the dark mode is set, we want to raise an onChange event. So in this case, we want to say invoke change whenever that property is set. Back on the JavaScript, we can create a new JavaScript function. We'll call this the add theme event listener. And with that, we will then accept a parameter called .NET, which is the .NET helper class. And then what we'll do is we'll have a window.matchMedia with a media query that we've defined before. And we'll add an event listener to that. And we'll listen for changes. So whenever that changes, we want to grab the event, and then we want to party on with that event. So whenever that event changes, when a theme switch occurs, we want to invoke a method asynchronously, and we want to invoke the method called setDarkMode, passing in the value. In this case, it is when it matches, true or false. So that's basically it. But we still need to implement the setDarkMode in C# land, right? So in this case, we do this by creating a new function called setDarkMode, and we'll accept the dark mode value in there, right? So instead of just setting the private property, we actually want to set the actual property in itself. So isDarkMode is then the isDarkMode that we get in the parameters. But to make this function callable from JavaScript, we need to have JS invocable defined in the function. I think I need a few curly braces here, and I think that should be doing the trick. Right. So if the demo guards are with me, with a quick F5, run the application. It's in a dark theme. And when I go ahead and change the theme now to light, nothing changes. I know why. We still need to listen for that event, right? So that's one more important thing that we need to do. So back at our application, when we do the first render, we want to be able to say, you know what, also theme, you must listen for changes. Right, so also when this is initialized, let's say on initialized, we want to also say, you know what, theme bind to that event. So whenever that theme changes, we want to say if the state has changed. So whenever the state has changed, the theme can kind of subscribe to that event. Right. Now when we hit F5, now it's actively listening for changes. Hopefully this will work. Our application opens up in dark mode, which is nice. Opens up settings. Let's see what happens. Go to appearance, light mode, dark mode. That also works in flight. What is interesting though, if we set to system default, right? And on operating system level, if we go to settings on Windows, here's my settings here. If I go to personalization, it's now on dark mode in Windows. If I set it to light mode, it propagates through the browser to the application web page. And it actually sets the theme like that. I think it's pretty cool. So now in a few lines of code, I've shown you how to implement a quick theme switcher inside Blazor, but also not just switching vanilla on and off, but also listening to changes whenever a user actively sets their theme to dark or light. I hope you like this video. If you do, give me a thumbs up and give me some comments or feedback down below. Thank you so much. Until next time.